Hello. Today I'm going to be reviewing the second season of Narcos. Now, I've already done a review of the first season, which you can watch on my YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. I highly recommend that you watch my review of season 1 first, because it'll kind of explain some of my thoughts on the series as a whole. Alright, now I'll quickly go over a general overview of what happens in season 2 now. Alright, so at the end of season 1, we're left with Pablo Escobar escaping from his prison. So I didn't really talk about this in my season 1 review, but he essentially makes a deal with the government to go to prison, but only if he can make his own prison himself, which is a pretty sweet deal because he gets basically this big mansion made, and he goes there and he basically just runs his drug empire from prison. But he's got, like, you know, pool tables and strippers and basically whatever he wants. So it's a pretty sweet deal. Anyway, at the end of the season, the Colombian army comes in to clear it out. They shoot the place up, kill everyone, but Escobar manages to escape. So season 2 picks up right after this. He has to sort of come out of hiding, regain his empire, which other contenders have been kind of trying to steal. So he comes back, starts to get more power, but after all the shenanigans and stuff from the first season, people are getting really, really sick of him. So he's got a lot of enemies. Obviously, the Colombian government, including the president, who's now done with making deals. He just wants Escobar to be killed. We have Carrillo, who gets brought back. He was sent away towards the end of season 1, but he comes back to lead the search block again. We obviously still have Steve Murphy and Javier Pena working for the DEA. But then you also have the rival drug cartel, the Cali cartel. We have these brothers who they form a group called Los Pepes. They basically get hired by these other drug cartel dudes to just start attacking Escobar's operations. So they run around killing his men and, like, hanging them up. So lots of sort of bad things are happening to Escobar, and his operations start to crumble and crumble under the pressure. And as the pressure rises, he also fights back a lot harder. And that's a general gist. I'll talk a little bit more about how it ends a bit later when I talk about Escobar's character. Now, one of the things I really liked in the first season is how morally grey a lot of the characters were. How they were often pushed to do some, questionable things in order to stop Escobar. Now, this season continues to push our characters further and further into grey areas. I mentioned Carrillo comes back. Now, pretty early on into season 2, there's this whole situation where they believe they've got a lead on where Escobar's going to be. So Carrillo leads this big operation to finally put an end to him. But it turns out to be a trap. He and his men get ambushed, and Carrillo ends up getting killed by Escobar himself. In the aftermath of this, someone else has to be hired to lead the search block. It ends up being this Colonel Martinezz. Now, he only really takes the job because the Colombian president puts the colonel's son in the search block. So this Martinezz takes the job so he can protect his son. Kind of a dick move by the president, but no one else wanted the job, so... Anyway, this Martinezz is a lot more by the book and a lot more cautious, and under his leadership, the ability of Pena and Murphy to respond to sightings of like Escobar's men and all that is drastically reduced. This ends up leading Pena to actually secretly start giving information to some other drug people so that they can come and help take on Escobar's men. Now he clearly struggles with this, like he's very torn up about it, but he doesn't see any other option. And he eventually tries to back out of it later on in the series. It's a very interesting little thing that happens. Now, one of the only negatives I had from after watching the first season was the excessive use of nudity and sex scenes. Now, thankfully, the show has significantly cut back on this. There's only a few sex scenes and nude scenes in the whole season, as opposed to season 1 where there was a few in each episode. So that's pretty good. In terms of new characters, there's a few new characters that show up that are actually quite interesting. They're more like side characters. I mentioned the Colonel and his son. Now they're kind of interesting characters. They're not fleshed out as much as they could have been, but the whole dynamic with them was sort of interesting. But again, I feel like it was a bit underutilized. Essentially, this young guy wants to prove himself and serve his country, but his father also doesn't want him to be like in the way of the danger. And I mean, considering all the messed up shit that happens because of Escobar and all the other drug people there, it's a reasonable concern. There's also Limón. Now, Limón was actually probably one of the most interesting characters on the show, to be honest. He's just sort of like your average guy. He's like a taxi driver. And his brother convinces him to sort of start working for Escobar as his driver. Essentially because Escobar needs to drive around, but he doesn't want to be seen. So the plan is he'll go in the trunk of a taxi. And to make it not suspicious that this dude is just driving around in a taxi with no one in the back or anything, he convinces his friend Maritza to just sit in the back and go along for the ride. This ends up being very bad for her because she becomes sort of a liability. Someone dobs in the fact that Escobar was in this taxi or something, and they assume that Maritza was responsible. So Limón and his brother Kika go to her house and track her down. And Limón, he doesn't really want to do anything. And there's this moment where he actually finds her hiding under the bed and doesn't reveal her location. He's very conflicted. He's a very interesting character, and I was excited to see how the story would progress. It did sort of die off a bit in the middle, towards the end though. After a few episodes of her not being in the show at all, Limón eventually goes back to where she is because he needs money. There's a bit of an altercation and she tries to appeal to his humanity, but he ends up shooting her and killing her. By the end, Limon's basically fully, on the bad side with Escobar. In fact, Limón is the last person with Escobar. The very last loyal person with him. Now, I want to talk about really the biggest thing about this show, the biggest strength, is really Escobar. Now, I talked about him a lot in this first season, but there's a few things I left out. First of all, I don't think I really talked about his whole family dynamic, but he's got his family, so he's got his wife and he's got 2 kids, as well as his elderly mother. And his whole dynamic with them it's very touching and humanizing, actually. So he clearly loves his family quite a lot, and he actually does a lot to try and keep them safe and protect them, which I really like because Escobar is a terrible person. He's the worst. Like, he kills hundreds, probably thousands of people. Hell, maybe it's tens of thousands. I don't know. He kills so many people, both directly and indirectly, and through his drug business. So it's probably impossible to know exactly how many he killed. He's truly an awful human being, but he is still human, and he loves his family. Now, obviously, Escobar is a real person. That's probably why he feels a lot more real in this. But I find the issue with a lot of villains in fictional stories is they don't feel real. They just feel like it's like evil is their only thing. So I find Escobar to be a lot more compelling of a villain because he feels real. Again, probably because he is real. Anyway, the story sort of focuses on Escobar and is really the main character. Season 1 sort of showed his rise. Season 2 is really all about his decline. He tries to scrape his way back to the top, but it's basically over for him now. The Colombian government is done making deals with him. The rival drug cartels, the cops, even the common people who supported him in the first season, they turn against him. Everyone's turning against him. And he's got more and more enemies. His operations start to crumble. Loyal men start to get captured. They reveal information to the cops. All the unlucky ones get captured by rival drug cartels and tortured and killed. Or they get straight up shot down by Los Pepes or something. Basically, all of the loyal men to Escobar end up captured or dead, with the one exception of Limón. There's also this moment where Escobar gets attacked at his home and barely escapes, and his brother-in-law ends up getting killed. After losing basically his entire operations, Escobar and Limón end up fleeing, and they go and stay with Escobar's father for a while. And there's this really good scene where Escobar's father sort of tells Pablo how he's ashamed of his son because he's a murderer and just a vile human being. It's a really good scene. Anyway, Escobar decides he realizes he's not welcome here, so he tries to get some money together. That's when Limón goes and steals some from Maritza and ends up killing her. And then Escobar and Limón return to Medellin. The last episode of the show, I really liked it. It was basically Escobar and Limón are back in Medellin, and it sort of just shows Escobar there. He's in hiding in this little building. He goes out to get ice cream, I think. And then he has this moment where he hallucinates his best friend and cousin who died in the first season. I didn't end up mentioning him because I didn't get around to it. His cousin and best friend Gustavo he was his best friend and closest companion in the first season. He ends up getting captured by Guerrilla and killed towards the end of the first season. He's dead by the time season 2 rolls around, but he still shows up a couple times. Once in a flashback where the two race, him and Escobar. And then in this last episode where Escobar sits on a bench and Gustavo just happens to walk up and they have a conversation before Escobar goes home. Now he goes home and starts talking to his family on the radio because he wants to send a message to the government. But by this point, the cops have figured out where he is. And we're treated to this scene where the cops storm his place. He and Limón attempt to flee, fighting them off with handguns. They manage to make it out onto the roof, killing a few cops as they escape. But then once on the roof, Limón gets taken out by a sniper. Pablo tries to run for a bit longer, but he eventually gets shot once by the sniper, and he falls to the ground. He's trying to shoot at the cops behind him, and he gets shot again. And all the cops converge on his location and take his gun away. And this scene it's extraordinary. Over 2 seasons, Pablo Escobar has been built up as this horrible, horrible person. He's done so much damage. He's killed so many people, ruined so many lives. And he always seemed to be 2 steps ahead of everyone. But he finally meets his end here. There's a bit of narration from Murphy as he starts to give this speech about how, he was just a man. Looking at him, he's rather unimpressive. He's lying on the ground, helpless. And then the speech is interrupted when one of the cops pulls out a gun and shoots Pablo in the head, and he dies. And it's a powerful moment. 2 seasons of build-up, and he just gets gunned down on a rooftop. There's not this big final showdown or anything. It's just his empire's gone. He only had one ally left, and he's lying there helpless. Just a man who's lost everything. It's probably one of my favourite endings to a season, to be honest. It just wraps up the story so well. Because at the end of the day, no matter how evil and terrible he was, you take away all his power, take away all his weapons, all his men, all his money. He's just a man. Now, in the aftermath, we get to see his family sort of starts to grieve a bit, while the rest of the country is cheering. There's this scene, actually, where Pablo's mother is on a bus when the news breaks, and everyone around her just starts cheering and cheering, and she's just like standing there in silence, as it hits her. And there's another scene where we just see Pablo's wife walk into the bedroom where her kids are, and it's a powerful moment. It makes you feel for these people. It makes you feel for the kids, I think. The mum and the wife, I think they were both old enough and well-informed enough to know that Escobar was a terrible person, and they supported him nonetheless. His mum even goes on television to try to tell people that he wasn't that bad. They show actual footage of Pablo Escobar's real mother trying to defend him. A man who blew up a plane with hundreds of people. A man who blows up a market. Again, killing many, many people, including kids. And she tries to defend him. Humans are truly complex beings. And yeah, Escobar's unceremonious death on that rooftop was well deserved. Also, minor thing, I really like how at the end it shows us a picture of the real scene where Escobar was dead and you had all the cops over him. I really liked this show. I really liked the first season. I really liked the second season. I think the second season overall was an improvement, and it's probably my favourite season so far. Now, there is a third season, which I've yet to watch. I will watch it and I will review it. I will admit I'm a little skeptical as to how it will be. With Escobar dead, I'm not sure how they're going to fill that void. He was really the main character. I don't know how they're going to do... they're going to have to get a new villain. I would presume the villains are going to be the drug people who ended up on top after season 2. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how season 3 is going to go, but I will reserve my judgment until I have seen it for myself. And yes, I'll definitely be reviewing that when I finish watching it. So if you want to see that, then be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you can get notified when I post that review. I highly, highly recommend Narcos. Season 1 is really good. Season 2 is even better. It's a very intriguing and gripping story. The characters are compelling to watch. And like just seeing Pablo's rise to power and then his downfall and his unceremonious end, it's just amazing. I'm almost tempted to say it's my favorite show. It's definitely got to be top 3. Who knows? Maybe I ought to do like a ranking in future or something. Anyway, if you've seen this show, feel free to let me know what you think of it in the comments. I'd love to hear what other people think, if you agree with me or disagree on something. That's it for my review. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.